Okay, here's a question for you. Do you learn better when your learning materials perfectly align with your learning style or learning preference? In other words, if you're a self-styled visual learner, do you actually learn better by watching videos? Or if you're a self-styled practical learner or kinesthetic learner, do you actually learn better when you get hands-on? These are the questions at the heart of the VARK model, which is the most popular and by extension the most controversial model of learning styles. I'm Harry from Growth Engineering, and today we are going to be exploring learning styles. Now, this is a hotly debated topic within the world of learning and development that regularly has learning professionals on either side of the debate pulling their hair out. Specifically, we're going to be exploring the VARK model, including its benefits, its limitations, and its practical applications, so that you can decide upon the truth for yourself. Okay, let's get started. So the VARK model was created back in 1987 by New Zealand-based educationalist Neil Fleming. He suggested that we all have preferences for how we take in and process information. Now that's not a particularly controversial idea, right? The controversial part is the suggestion that these preferences actually help to inform learning outcomes. And that's controversial because there's no real evidence for it. Now, it's also worth noting that this wasn't an entirely unique idea. After all, you did have educational researchers back in the 1920s looking into the concept of learning styles, and people like Honey and Mumford had created their own inventory in the early 80s. And you have the experiential learning expert David Kolb coming up with his own model back in 1985. In fact, if you rewind back an extra 2,400 years or so, you have philosophers like Aristotle talking about how children all had their own innate skills and abilities. But Fleming's real innovation was in taking the existing VAK model, that's VAK, and splitting the visual element in two. Now we'll get into the specific categories in just a moment. He also created the VARK survey, which has now been completed over 1 million times. And this survey helped people to find out what learning style they have. You know, kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz helping people to find out what Simpsons character they are. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the model itself. As you might have guessed, VARK is an acronym which breaks learners down into 4 different categories. It stands for visual, auditory, read-write, and kinesthetic. Let's explore each of these separate learner types one by one. Visual learners like to learn by watching, so they enjoy videos, they like lectures, they like recordings. Auditory learners, on the other hand, like to learn by hearing, so they're going to enjoy audiobooks, podcasts, and perhaps recorded lectures. Read-write learners like text-based learning experiences, so perhaps reading a manual or a guidebook. And finally, kinesthetic learners like to learn by doing, so they like to get hands-on. Kinesthetic being the word for movement or positional awareness. Now there's also a 5th category of learners called multimodal learners. And these are learners who have more than one particular preference. The idea is that by catering to these learning styles, we can begin to boost learning outcomes. Sounds good, right? Well, the trouble is there's no real evidence that learning styles actually work. In fact, the idea that preferences impact outcomes seems a little bit misguided. Just because I like something doesn't mean it's good for me. For instance, I might enjoy eating bucket loads of chocolate cake, but that's not going to have a positive impact on me in the long run. Also, just because I like something doesn't mean I'm going to be any good at it. For instance, I may enjoy watching Lionel Messi play football, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to replicate what he does on the pitch. The same's true for learning. Just because I have a preference for visual learning doesn't mean I'm going to be particularly adept at it. And let's not forget, our preferences won't always be available to us, so we must always be ready and willing to adapt when necessary. So what should we do? Should we just discard the whole idea of the VARK model and learning styles completely? Well, I wouldn't go that far. After all, the act of thinking about how we learn is valuable in and of itself. It helps us to understand our strengths and weaknesses and to identify opportunities for improvement. And besides, even if these styles aren't set in stone, thinking about how we vary our teaching methods does help to keep things interesting and cater to various different learning needs. Suffice to say, The VARK model is not a silver bullet solution for your learning program. It's more of a creative springboard. In fact, Neil Fleming himself has said that he sees the model as a catalyst for reflection rather than something that's rigid and inflexible. As ever, our focus should be on creating learning experiences that are based on good instruction, clear explanations, and learning theories that are research-backed and evidence-based. If we can do this, then success is sure to follow. Okay, that's everything from me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Happy learning, and we'll see you in the next one.